People were chained, they were beaten, they were stuck, cut, they were bled, and they would give themselves freely for this.
I remember just constant, absolute terror, and I can't explain how intense, how strong, how all-encompassing that terror is. Unless you do this, you're gonna get killed, you're gonna die.
I watched them take the lives of children. I watched them take the life of my twin brother.
They didn't deserve to live, you know? They begged by their actions to be killed.
This is inhuman. It's absolutely inhuman.
I myself would like to go and crawl back into a corner and say this doesn't happen.
People simply don't believe that this stuff goes on.
If we don't educate one another, it's going to be the crime of the 90s.
Satanism. To most, it conjures images of medieval black masses or sinister deeds done for the devil. But simply said, Satanism is the belief that evil is excusable and attaining power to control people and circumstances is desirable. Whether you believe in a literal devil is not important in understanding Satanism's effect on our society. The evidence is in. Satan worship and satanic cults are growing rapidly, and adherents of these ideas are becoming more vocal and more dangerous. These symbols of Satanism are turning up everywhere, on walls, on clothes, on album covers, and even on bodies of murder victims. Law enforcement officials admit that satanic cults operate in nearly every community in America. Young children from Oregon to Massachusetts say they've been raped, tortured, and forced to watch small animals killed during satanic ceremonies. School officials in many cities report high school students are forming satanic groups. A Chicago policeman told us, satanic crime makes gang activity look like a nursery school. During this program, you will see the many sides of Satanism. You'll be shocked. And you may be tempted to turn away in denial of such unspeakable horror. If you think I'm exaggerating, watch closely. Listen to what is being done in the name of Satan.
Hail Satan!
Hail Satan. Those were the words of Night Stalker Richard Ramirez. Ramirez is the Satan worshiper who now sits on California's death row after being convicted of 13 brutal murders. Ramirez often left satanic symbols at the scenes of his crimes, carving a pentagram on the body of one victim and on the bedroom wall of another. In his formal statement to the court at his death sentence hearing, Ramirez said, quote, "Legions of the night, I will be avenged. Lucifer dwells within us all." In San Francisco, former waiter Clifford St. Joseph was found guilty of murdering a man during an apparent satanic ritual. The victim's body had all the signs. A pentagram had been carved in his chest, the body had been drained of its blood, he'd been sexually abused, and one of his testicles had been cut off. In Dade County, Florida, Frank Fuster and his wife were convicted of ritually abusing children at the daycare center they operated in their home. Children at the center said the Fusters made them drink urine, eat feces, and engage in sex acts during preschool games. The case horrified the community, and the prosecutor called the Fusters' systematic abuse of the children, quote, outrageous. And in the longest trial in American history, Children who attended the McMartin Preschool in Manhattan Beach, California, told of seeing teachers in dark robes, watching small animals killed, playing sexual games, drinking blood, and eating feces. In a trial that many say was botched, none of the defendants was found guilty. But 7 of the 12 jurors said they believed the children had been abused, and virtually every expert familiar with the case believes a satanic cult was operating out of the school. Of all the crimes committed in the name of Satan, the most heartbreaking involved children. For young victims of Satanism, the joy of childhood gives way to pain, darkness, and fear. Sometimes that pain comes from strangers, sometimes from their own families. We've talked with a number of adults who tell stories of being raised in families where satanic rituals were part of everyday life. For many adult survivors, their childhoods were filled with torture, sexual abuse, cannibalism, and murder.
I was forced to help kill other children. I was forced to participate in their cannibalism.
Esther grew up on the East Coast. Today, she lives thousands of miles away. But her childhood memories of bizarre satanic rituals remain. In the outside world, her parents were active members of their community, involved in church, school, and organizations like Little League and Girl Scouts. But on the inside, behind closed doors, they and other members of their satanic cult forced Esther to endure repeated ritualistic attacks on her body and her mind.
There was a circle, and I was put in the middle of the circle, and there was a fire around me. During that part, I was told I was being married to Satan and being a child of Satan forever, and that kind of stuff. And then I was pulled out to the front of the circle beyond the fire, and then raped by the men in the cult.
Most vividly, I recall about torture. I remember a lot of it very vividly. Being tied hand and foot and burned on my genitals.
Karen grew up across the country from Esther. Her parents were also well regarded in their community, but they too led a dark and secret life from which Karen is still struggling to recover. Today, she edits a national newsletter for other survivors of satanic cults. Karen's abuse was so extreme, she often passed out from internal hemorrhaging and pain. She remembers being raped by cult members and shut away for hours in a dark, scary place.
It was actually a closet and a welded wire cage, and the bottom of the cage would be open. That would be how I would be put in it and suspended in a closet. And it was a very simple thing that they did. They just set a board inside the door and then dumped a bunch of snakes in on the floor, which I could see. They were probably even harmless snakes, but I was a child, and then they shut the door and left me in there in the dark, and I could hear it.
I was forced to eat human waste, yes.
Christy also suffered horrible abuse at the hands of her family and their satanic cult. Even as a toddler, Christy says her parents forced her to participate in gruesome rituals, drinking blood, eating feces, and killing children. Christy finally escaped from her family and underwent years of therapy. Now she can talk calmly about the years of abuse she suffered at the hands of her Satan-worshiping parents.
I remember being drug out of bed at midnight and taken to this dark cemetery where they would have rituals going on, satanic services, various things, and there'd be people chanting and the black robes. And I remember one of the first experiences as a teenager where I watched them sacrifice a little boy, and he was blonde hair, blue eyes, just this beautiful little boy. He was about 5 years old, and he was groomed for this, and they constantly said to him, don't cry, don't cry, this is what you were born for. I did find myself screaming out at the injustice of it, and the high priest at one point came over and tried to shut me up, and I said to him, God's going to get you for this. And he took me from the tree where I had been tied to observe and put me in a pit. And in this pit, there were the remains of human sacrifices, of babies, of animals, and snakes that they used in the various ceremonies. And in this pit, they put a cover over it and left me there for quite some time. I'm not sure how long. I lost track of time. I no longer knew when it was daylight or when it was dark because of the covering. And every so often, they'd come and just take the covering off and just stand at the top of this pit and taunt me, "Where's your God now?" And they threw human flesh, baby flesh down. And that's what I was to survive on, if I was to survive.
They made it to be like it was a great privilege to eat the bodies. I mean, the girl that I had to kill, they treated me like I was being given a great gift when they gave me a part of her body that I had to eat. I remember being horrified, but knowing that my horror would not let me survive and that I had to put my horror somewhere else. The same thing happened when I had to have oral sex with a bunch of dogs. You know, that what they were doing was they were cutting out the dogs' penises and stuff, and they made me have oral sex to bring out the penis so that they could cut them off. And I had to do that. I know that there were at least 12 dogs in there, and there might have been more. I mean, I never really stopped to count. I just remember that there were a lot of them. And, you know, I couldn't have any reaction, and I couldn't go throw up and wash myself and all those things I wanted to do because I would be punished or killed.
They threatened me constantly with loss of life, my own life, the lives of others. I watched them take the lives of children. I watched them take the life of my twin brother when we were just 4. I watched them kill animals. And then as I grew up, the threats became a little bit more subtle. It was always just, don't talk. And that was real hard to deal with, you know, because people say, well, why didn't you ever say anything? Well, when you have such vivid memories of seeing your brother die, then you know not to talk.
Yeah, I wish it had never happened. I wish it never happened to anybody. I wish the losses have been tremendous. The pain has been overwhelming. The struggle has been a lifetime of struggle.
The incredible stories told by survivors come out in words and in the artwork they create. Sometimes the art is done as part of therapy. Sometimes it occurs during a private moment when a survivor tries to make sense of what's happened. These drawings by survivors from all over the country reflect similar memories of torture and rape at the hands of satanic cults. Baby killings, ritualistic rape, cannibalism. It seems like the stuff of supermarket tabloids or trash TV. We could dismiss all of this easily, except for so many similar stories told by so many survivors. The reality of Satanism is even more believable when you talk to reputable therapists like those here at Columbine Hospital in Denver, Colorado. They believe the survivors are telling the truth. Linda Young is a psychiatric nurse who works with adult survivors of satanic cults. Her goal is to help them move beyond the trauma of their experiences into healthy, happy lives.
Most of these people come to us thinking what's happened to them isn't true. They don't want it to be true, so they go back and forth. We call it the true, not true experience. When they're in a memory, they know it's true, and then they let the emotion out, and it's very true, and then the emotion goes away, and they say, oh, maybe it didn't happen. So that letting the world know that it's true Many of them know that that will never happen, or it's a very good possibility in our lifetime that most people will not ever begin to believe that this is really going on. It's very important for them that they know that I believe them, that I know this happened to them, that I have no doubt that this happened to them.
All right, this is one where we have backward writing.
Dr. Walter Young is head of the unit that treats adult survivors at Columbine, one of the few inpatient units in the entire United States. Dr. Young has treated or consulted on about 100 such cases. Today, he receives referrals from therapists throughout the country.
Says that she remembers and can cry.
I guess the thing that's most compelling to me as a clinician is to hear reports from a variety of patients who do not have contact with each other, who report very similar stories, and stories which are shocking and alarming about murder and sacrifice of human beings, cannibalism, sexual promiscuity, in what appears to be a very ritualized, planned setting, using not only children, both boys and girls, but adults as well. We also hear similarities in reporting of being buried alive and then being unearthed and told that they've been reborn in the name of Satan. We have stories of people being married to Satan in marriage ceremonies. There are repeated reports of serial sexual assaults with the impregnation of a young adolescent and the destruction of that child, often by the mother itself, in the name of Satan. More recently, we're beginning to hear more specific techniques of indoctrination and torture. Torture is very frequently used to one, strengthen the individual to maintain secrecy within the cult, that is intimidation. It's also considered something to be desired by cult, that is the toleration of pain, the mixing of pain and sexual experiences and blurring the boundaries between them. But it's, quote, to make a good soldier for Satan.
What we're dealing with at this point, in my belief anyway, is a well-organized religious and cult-based group that is widespread.
Myra Riddell is a private therapist and the driving force behind the Ritual Abuse Task Force of the Los Angeles County Women's Commission. Experts like Riddell are convinced Satanists can be found at every level of society. They are also convinced that the number of practicing Satanists is growing. According to Riddell, it's hard to get accurate information on satanic cults because they exert almost total control over their members and their young victims.
There are several purposes to this kind of control. One, it permits the rituals to go on with the complete cooperation of the individual who is being sacrificed in whatever way, whether it's being killed or burned or sexually used for the ritual purposes. And the other is one that concerns many of us a great deal, and that is that these kids who are being this brainwashed are being inculcated into a belief in Satanism on a very basic unconscious level. We in fact, and they in fact, are trying to raise a whole generation of Satanists.
In the past, satanic cults have maintained their membership by raising their own children within the cult. Now experts see an alarming new trend. Survivors say that satanic groups are establishing preschools and daycare centers for the sole purpose of recruiting vast numbers of small children.
We are hearing from those survivors that there is a deliberate and concerted and well-organized, well-orchestrated effort to infiltrate the preschool system.
And here's the spy shark.
Psychologist Catherine Gould is known nationally for her work in treating ritually abused children. She's deeply disturbed that Satanists are preying on children at such an early age.
The purpose is to achieve an indoctrination at an early formative age when a child is going to be most susceptible to being emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually hooked to the cult and hooked for life. The idea is that you get the child under the age of 6, you abuse them, you indoctrinate them, you use them for cult purposes, you break them down, you strip them of any sense of free will, you strip them of any sense of connectedness to family or to the positive parts of society, and you have somebody who functions for the purposes of the cult. And the idea there, of course, is that the cult can call upon that person later in life.
Doreen Kenny is one parent who suspects that her daughter was the victim of satanic abuse at a preschool in Southern California.
She had stomach aches, she had headaches, she would complain about various limbs hurting her, I mean screaming with pain, just absolutely screaming with pain. Night terrors, just horrible, horrible night terrors. She regressed from a 3-year-old to a 2-year-old, and she was back in diapers. Finally, one day after being in school about 6 months, a little over 6 months, she had told my oldest daughter she was poked. And once that came out, I knew, because of all the things that had been going on, I just knew in my heart that she had been molested.
At first, Kenny assumed her daughter was the victim of sexual abuse, and she placed the little girl in therapy. Over many months, however, the real story began to unfold. Kenny discovered that her daughter had been subjected to various forms of sexual and ritualistic abuse that paralleled activities common to satanic cults. 6 years later, her daughter is still haunted by fear.
The most frightening stuff that is still with her is she believes she's being watched. Every red car and black car that goes by is watching her. Every lady that dresses in blue are kidnappers. They will kidnap kids. These are things that she's been told. She has at one point, and as she continues in therapy, gets better and better, but at one point believed very much so that she was a child of Satan and that she actually had Satan's heart put into her. She still has trouble with that when you get palpitations, that her heart's going to explode, that because she's told.
Dr. Roland Summit is a psychiatrist who treats child ritual abuse victims at Harbor UCLA Medical Center. He says many satanic cults use intimidation, fear, and even drugs to make children keep quiet.
Children report being given drugs, which makes them feel sleepy, makes them forget. They're told they're going to have an operation. When they regain consciousness, they have what looks like a scar, which disappears, a kind of scratch on their skin, and they're told that something has been implanted inside of them. It may be a bomb, it may be the part of an animal that's been killed, and that will know if they're thinking about telling, and it will become armed and it will destroy them. So when children think about telling, and when they get nervous, there's a throbbing in their head, which they interpret as the bomb ready to go off, or a churning in their stomach, which may be the dog chewing at them. And from a child's point of view, they are now booby-trapped against telling.
It seems that Satanists will use all sorts of elaborate and insidious schemes to keep their young victims under control. Consider the case of Ed Gallup, a Protestant minister, his wife Mary Lou, and their son Chip. All three were convicted of sexually abusing children at the 2 preschools they operated in Roseburg, Oregon. The children told stories of ritualistic animal killings and sexual abuse with carrots, bottles, and sticks. Judge William Laswell, who prosecuted the Gallups when he was a district attorney, says the family intimidated their young victims by saying they had magic glasses capable of seeing into the children's homes.
Chip, the youngest of the Gallups, had a pair of magic glasses, which is simply an oversized set of sunglasses you would buy at a carnival. The mother had a set too, and the father. And the children told us that Chip Gallup would get up on the stage, put the glasses on, turn in the direction of where the child lived, and then make some observation about whether the child finished breakfast, put away his pajamas, left some tracks on the carpet. What would have happened is that Chip would have called the family and learned something about what happened that morning. And so when Chip told them that he could see into their home and tell them something that they knew had happened, they believed that he in fact could see them and hear them wherever they were. And he had threatened to kill their parents and harm them if they talked. In addition, he'd given them, most of them, a photograph of himself, which he asked to have displayed in their bedroom so that he was always looking at them that way too.
Crimes committed in the name of Satan are beginning to receive special attention by police officials Several departments have established occult crime units and are learning to spot the evidence of satanic activity. A number of investigators are working to uncover the links between survivor stories and existing cults. Others are looking into the possibility of a national or international conspiracy involving satanic groups. There's much to be learned, and law enforcement officials are just beginning to scratch the surface. But across the country, police investigators agree a disturbing trend is emerging. The most vicious crimes being committed in the name of Satan are being perpetrated by young people in their teens. Pete Rowland and 2 other members of his satanic cult clubbed a 4th boy to death in the woods of rural Missouri. The group had been practicing satanic rites for years, torturing so many animals to death they lost count of the number. They were obsessed with satanic books, gory movies, and heavy metal music. After the brutal murder, Rowland said songs by the rock group Metallica drove him and his friends into a frenzy as they planned the attack. Eddie Krigler, an Arkansas youth, claimed he was acting under direct orders from Satan when he beat his parents with a 5-foot club, then stabbed them repeatedly with the same butcher knives he used to perform satanic rites. At the time of the attack, Krigler was recruiting other teenagers to form a satanic cult. In New Jersey, 14-year-old Tommy Sullivan stabbed his mother a dozen times with his Boy Scout knife. After that, Sullivan slit his own throat. Just weeks before the attack, he told a friend that Satan appeared to him in a vision, ordering him to kill his family. For Ricky Casso, involvement in Satanism led to murder and suicide. Casso and his friends formed a cult called Knights of the Black Circle. One night they turned on another teen, Gary Lowers, forced him to say, "I love Satan," and gouged out his eyes before stabbing him to death. The day after he was arraigned, Casso hanged himself with a bedsheet.
Satanism is on the rise, and it is the crime of the 90s.
Randy Eman is a police officer who spends much of his time investigating crimes that have links to the occult. Eman believes the lure of Satanism is too powerful for many young people to resist.
The danger of Satanism and the occult to society, I liken to a narcotic. It's addictive. It's power they're seeking. And when they find out that they toyed with a ritual, and that ritual worked, they're hooked. It's just like the hook in the side of their mouth as a fish. It takes them one step further, and pretty soon the hook is not on the side of the mouth. They have swallowed it completely. And it is a magnet, and it is a magnet that they can't go away from. It just draws them further and further and further. And pretty soon, they're not going with just lightweight rituals. They're graduating from candle rituals to wearing the costumes, the regalia with the ritual swords. They're going to the black hoods, to the animal sacrifices, and where may that take them? To human sacrifice.
Human sacrifice. That's how far Sean Sellers went. Today, Sean is in solitary confinement on death row at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary. Sean was just 15 years old when he was tried, convicted, and sentenced to death for 3 cold-blooded murders, including that of his mother and stepfather. Murders he committed in the name of Satan.
I was mad at my parents. I was doing destruction rituals, you know, saying, "Satan, kill him, get him out of my life." I tried to move out. They came and got me, wouldn't let me move out. And it just built up to the point to where I did it. I had this dream over and over again that I'd kill my parents, you know, that I'd sacrifice them to Satan in my dream. And like I said this before, I woke up and it wasn't a dream. You know, it was reality. It really happened.
The murders took place in this house, in a well-kept Oklahoma City suburb where Sean and his parents lived. On the night of March 6, 1986, dressed in black underwear and a black hooded cape, Sean tiptoed into his parents' bedroom as they slept, pulled out a .44 Magnum revolver, and shot them both in the head. Later, he went back to their room, looked at the dead bodies, and laughed. What could have driven a young man to such violence? On the outside, they looked like a happy family, but the real story was different. For From early childhood on, Sean was shuttled from relative to relative or left with babysitters. At 10, one of those sitters introduced him to Satanism, and Sean was hooked. By the time he was in high school, Satanism dominated his life. He formed a satanic coven with a group of his friends. He kept a satanic diary and illustrated it with satanic symbols. He built an altar in his bedroom where he performed secret ceremonies. He wrote incantations to Satan, sometimes in his own blood, and he drank his blood regularly.
I began to drink blood because it gave me a rush, it gave me a thrill. You know, it was like, wow, I'm drinking blood, you know. And then I began to like it. You know, the taste of it, I liked the taste of it. It was a very strange taste, and I liked it. And it got to the point where I had to carry blood around with me all the time, because if I didn't, I'd get to thinking about it, and that'd be all I could think about. It was like it was craving, like, you know, I needed it.
Even at school, there were signs of Sean's deepening involvement in Satanism. When his teacher assigned an essay on how students had grown spiritually, Sean wrote about his dedication to the devil. He even read his satanic books in class. Yet no one intervened.
It seems like everybody was seeing that something needed to be done, that something was going on, and they were taking steps towards that, but they were all afraid to call my parents or to sit me down or whatever and do something, to really make a commitment and do something, because maybe it was because they thought if it was, you know, Satanism or something, you know, maybe it was religious and we can't get involved in religious things or whatever.
Things continued to get worse until the night of September 8, 1985, when Sean and his friend Richard decided to undertake the ultimate satanic act.
We had decided we were going to break all the 10 Commandments to show Satan that we were completely dedicated to him, and we only had one more commandment to break: thou shalt not murder. And that's what that night was to be. That night was to be this sacrifice, get rid of these people who didn't matter anyway, who were in our way, who, by the instructions in the Satanic Bible, you know, said that they didn't deserve to live, you know. They begged by their actions to be killed. I'm on death row. I am at the bottom of the American life, you know. I'm at the bottom. I am the most hated person in America. Death row inmates, nobody likes. Death row inmates have no hope. That's what Satanism's given me.
George Berlanger was also seduced into Satanism as a teenager. Now he's 27, stable, married, and the father of a little girl. But his teen years grew violent as he became more and more deeply engulfed in satanic beliefs.
I was going to kill my parents at one point. I took knives and I started down the hall, and I was going to cut my parents up, and for some reason it stopped. I was very cold, very demanding, very physically violent to my parents. Very physically violent. I used to punch my dad out. I used to hit my mom. I mean, the whole night without any remorse at all. At this point, my parents were so afraid of me. They were afraid. They were afraid for their lives. They put a deadbolt lock on their door. That's how afraid they were. In their own house.
Like many other teenagers who become heavily involved in Satanism, George came from a troubled family. His father was an alcoholic who abused George and his mother. George took out his anger at school and was expelled at 16. After that, he became totally immersed in Satanism, obsessed with performing rituals, sacrificing animals, and drinking blood.
It is a communion to the devil. The way that you ritualistically take the blood, do the spells with the blood, and ingest the blood is doing a communion to Satan. And when you ingest the blood, it is to accumulate power.
It would be more comfortable to think the stories we've heard are fabricated, or the exploits of a lunatic fringe. But if we believe the experts, Satan worship is undeniably real, and Satan worshipers pose a serious threat to society's well-being. During this program, we've heard from many victims of Satanism about tragic, alarming, and nearly fatal encounters with devil worship. We've listened to those who participated willingly and those who were victimized against their wills. We've heard reports of innocent children raised in a brutal environment of torture, and teenagers who were compelled to commit crimes and to kill in the name of Satan. All these accounts could make us question our fundamental faith in the decency and goodwill of humanity. But what we've seen should compel us to act responsibly and address the root causes of this terrible malevolence in our midst. Satanism thrives on secrecy. Its existence depends on concealment. That's why the bravery of the people you've listened to during this program is so phenomenal. They've spoken out, even under the threat of intimidation and death. Their courage comes from knowing that breaking the silence will save others from the anguish they endured or committed. Think about the remarkable consistency in all these stories and the blunt honesty of those who have suffered so much. See beyond the atrocity of Satanism. And remember that many victims are still imprisoned by the fear that no one will help them, that no one will believe them. The seduction of Satanism will end when you and I confront this national tragedy by marshaling the forces of our schools, churches, community organizations, law enforcement associations, and social agencies. We must expose all the evil being done in the name of Satan. I'm Bob Larson.
And it was all because I thought that Satanism would promote me. I thought that Satanism was the ideal of self-preservation and would make me successful, would make me the person that I wanted to be. That's the biggest lie that I've ever seen.
I really believe that survivors need to know that there's hope, that they can live through this.
This is my truth as I know it. And I know that I didn't make it up because I know I was there. And I know that there will be people who will never believe it. It's very, very difficult to confront the reality of this, because once you confront the reality of this, you feel such a tremendous sense of responsibility to do something.
During the past decade, an epidemic of ritual crime has swept our nation at an alarming rate. Law-abiding citizens report satanic crimes in every state, and the number of cases investigated by police continues to rise. Well-organized satanic groups are creating a reign of death and destruction, which cannot be ignored. The FBI's 1988 Uniform Crime Report indicates more than 18,000 murder investigations during that year, and 26% of those murders were listed as bizarre or ritualistic. In that same year, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children listed more than 9,000 unresolved cases of missing children. The National Clearinghouse on Satanic Crime in America estimates 50% of the cases of missing children and bizarre murders may be linked directly to satanic and other occult organizations. It is common for these groups to kidnap their victims, usually infants and young children, from hospitals, orphanages, shopping centers, or off the streets. Others live and die without a trace. This is because some children are born to cult members and later killed, so there are no records of their births or deaths. Inmate interviews conducted by Professor Al Carlisle of the Utah State Prison System show that lawbreakers are heavily involved in the occult. There may be as many as 60,000 human sacrifices per year in this country, according to Professor Carlisle, and there is a distinct correlation, he says, with these human sacrifices and the high number of missing persons. This is because some satanic groups dispose of their victim by dismembering the body and cremating the remains, eliminating any possibilities for identification. Members of satanic and occult groups come from all walks of life. Many are highly intelligent individuals. Michael A. Aquino, senior initiate and founder of the Temple of Set in San Francisco, is also a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve. He's received a top-secret security clearance to attend the National Defense University in Washington, D.C. Anton Sandor LaVey, founder of the Church of Satan, was once a circus lion tamer. These charismatic leaders, and many like them, seek out others who have a high degree of intelligence. Some cult leaders prey upon emotionally unstable people. Examples are Jim Jones of the Guyana Massacre and Charles Manson. With his Manson family, he created a reign of terror and death. Unsuspecting young people are drawn to the occult because of various influences, including breakdown of the family unit, lack of closeness, negative lifestyles, self-centeredness, and a me-oriented society full of throwaway and latchkey kids. Adolescents are ripe for satanic or occult involvement because of their maturing nature and developing sexuality. They feel a need to belong to a peer group structure, to be accepted or identified, and stand out among their associates and friends. Teenagers also tend to be impatient. They desire quick answers and the ability to cause instant changes. This eventually leads to rebellion against parental authority and social standards. Some young people are attracted to the occult by seemingly harmless pleasures, such as games and music. They start by participating in fantasy role-playing games, like Dungeons and Dragons. Others are drawn into Satanism by heavy metal rock music. These heavy metal groups flaunt satanic symbols on their album covers and anti-Christian satanic messages in their music. Their songs promote the demonic themes of death, doom, violence, and the rejection of morality and religion. Heavy metal groups and solo artists such as Slayer, Ozzy Osbourne, Motley Crue, Venom, and AC/DC have sent heavy metal record sales skyrocketing. Members of satanic or occult groups share common traits, such as an interest in old occultic forms of religion and worship, the desire to perform certain bizarre acts that society condemns, a belief in the ability to control magic for personal gain, mind control, or the power to force others to act out whatever is commanded of them, and the access to perform perverted sex acts, such as homosexuality, bisexuality, sodomy, bestiality, and necrophilia. Not all satanic or occultic groups engage in illegal activities. However, many do, and some of their criminal acts include trespassing, vandalism, burglary, animal mutilations, trafficking and selling of illegal drugs, kidnapping, physical, mental, and sexual child abuse, rape, and murder. All of these acts are carried out in the name of Satan. Therefore, the participants have no remorse after having committed them. The satanic philosophy teaches that personal pleasure is the ultimate achievement, even at the expense of others. There are 4 different symbols which refer to the mark of the beast, or Satan. 3 sixes in a row. 3 sixes facing inward of each other. 3 F's in a row, F being the 6th letter of the alphabet. Also, 3 circles interlinked with each other. The sign of the horns is a hand signal given among members of the occult. Teenagers who flock to heavy metal concerts flash this sign often. The swastika, or broken cross, originally represented the 4 winds, 4 seasons, and the 4 points of the compass, Today, Satanists use it to symbolize the elements of nature turning against itself to create a world out of harmony. The upside-down cross is a blaspheme of the Christian cross. This symbol is often found at satanic ritual sites and at schools and churches which have been vandalized and desecrated. The cross of confusion is an ancient Roman symbol, questioning the existence or validity of Christianity. It is often seen on road signs and bridges, as well as public buildings. The inverted pentagram, also called the Baphomet, represents two things. One, man's denial of God and acceptance of Satan. The other, the goat's head, which symbolizes man's lust for the flesh. Sometimes you may see the goat's head superimposed within the pentagram. The hexagon, also referred to as the seal of Solomon, is frequently used by many young people in the occult world. A triangle may vary in size, but it is generally inscribed on the ground and is the place where a demon would appear in conjured rituals. The circle symbolizes eternity and protection from evil. Other symbols of Satan are the letters ACDC, which stand for Antichrist, Devil Child. Horns and tail added to any letter of the alphabet. A lightning bolt indicating heaven to hell strength. And occult numbers 3, 6, 9, and 13, which may also appear in Roman numeral form. Are prone to violent crime. These highly destructive Satanists make families their primary targets. They believe that the breakdown of the family unit will guarantee the destruction of goodness, morality, and civilization, and that is when the nightmare begins for decent people everywhere. For some, the nightmare is over. They are the victims of satanic crime. Overcoming this evil begins with every family. Parents must provide attention and love, protecting their children from corrupt influences, keeping the lines of communication open, and insisting on proper education. When this is accomplished, you can be confident that children will grow into happy, well-adjusted, and productive citizens, free from satanic and occultic influences.
Is the apparent practice of Satanism. That's worship of the devil. Now, police have been skeptical when investigating these acts, just as we are in reporting them. But there is no question that something is going on out there, and that's sufficient reason for 2020 to look into it. One caution, we believe that some of the pictures and descriptions in Tom Jarrell's report may be disturbing and even frightening, particularly to younger viewers. Here is Tom's report.
Dateline, Northport, Long Island. A quiet community rocked by reports a teenager was dragged through these woods toward a late-night ritual of death. An eyewitness said the victim, Gary Lowers, was forced to pray to Satan as he was repeatedly stabbed to death. 2 young men were arrested. James Troiano was found innocent last month, but his alleged accomplice never made it to trial. Ricky Casso committed suicide in jail the day after his arrest. Despite numerous signs that Casso was into Satanism and rock music associated with devil worship, police steadfastly refused to label this case satanic. The official explanation, a drug-related crime. Dateline, Phoenix, Arizona, 140 dogs found slaughtered. Across the country, police tell us, there have been more than 15,000 animal mutilations, and often they were clearly used in some kind of bizarre ritual, but there's no official explanation. Dateline, Walnut Grove, Alabama. Police are called in to investigate the site of a ritual. They find various satanic paraphernalia, including pictures of the devil. There was a routine inquiry which didn't discover what was going on here. Across this country and Canada, satanic graffiti is turning up on public buildings and abandoned buildings, where police suspect secret meetings are being held by people calling themselves Satanists, people who worship the devil. Most often found, the inverted 5-pointed satanic pentagram, the upside-down cross, the evil eye, references to Babylon, and the devil's number, 666. Vandals often target churches. Here in southern Maine, after a dozen churches were painted with satanic symbols, police arrested a suspect.
Worrying about the message. That's one comment.
Although vandalism charges were later dropped, he offered an explanation for the church graffiti from behind a locked door.
Anyone that receives the mark of the beast, which is 666, is his number, is going to burn in hell forever and ever.
It's the way some people interpret the Bible. The book of Revelations, where it's written, Satan can be identified by the number 666, calling him the beast, which deceiveth the whole world. The goat's head is a key symbol of the beast. Yet throughout history, Satan has taken on many different shapes and disguises. He's widely considered by conventional religions as the embodiment of evil, on a mission to tempt man to sin and destroy God's kingdom. Today, we have found Satan is alive and thriving, or at least plenty of people believe he is. His followers are extremely secretive, but found in all walks of life. Modern Satanism was shockingly dramatized on the screen in the mid-60s with the release of Rosemary's Baby.
What have you done to it? What have you done to its eyes?
He has his father's eyes. It's a movie that's been described as the best advertisement that devil worship has ever had.
What are you talking about? Guy's eyes are normal. What have you done to him, you maniac?
Satan is his father, not Guy. He came up from hell and begat a son of mortal woman. Hail, Satan!
Hail, Satan!
Satan is his father, and his name is Adrian. He shall overthrow the mighty in their temples. He shall redeem the despised and wreak vengeance.
The zeal of these fictional devil worshippers is strikingly similar to that of real-life Satanists.
God is dead!
Hail, Satan!
Satan lives!
See these guys, they
wouldn't leave him alone.
Mike Warnke is a former Satanist. Today he's a successful comedian, preaching Christianity in the form of humor. But back in the 60s, he was one of Satanism's high priests.
The things that you would see in a satanic altar.
He showed us what a satanic temple might resemble, and typical implements used to worship the devil.
The bones usually are used in a ceremony that calls for telling the future with the bones or a part of the deceased person.
He also explained what attracted him to Satanism.
I was basically drawn into it when I was young, just wanting to be somebody special. I just wanted to be different than everybody and have something that was special that everybody, looked up to.
This is a 15-year-old boy who also wanted to be special. Before hanging himself, he wrote on his body, "I'm coming home, Master, and Satan lives," and 666. It was a case with such clear satanic symbols, it brought two police officers together. Sandy Gallant is one of them. She's a San Francisco policewoman, and now a leading authority on satanic crime, a specialty other cops often scoff at.
As time goes on, maybe my work gets a little more credibility. There's one guy that still walks around, and when he sees me, he goes like this wherever he goes. But I've gotten pretty much used to that.
Why did you get... The other officer is Dale Griffiths, chief of a small police department halfway across the country in Tiffin, Ohio.
We have kids being killed. We have people missing in America. We have our own MIAs right here. We have cattle being killed. We have all types of perversion going on, and it's affecting America.
America is being affected. Nationwide, we found that minor cases of satanic activity light up the map. Not a single state is unaffected. But even more frightening is the number of reported murders and suicides with satanic clues. All of them were investigated by police, but usually without much result. We found that Satanism falls into three categories. One, self-styled Satanist, a growing number of young people who dabble in devil worship. Two, religious Satanist, people who publicly worship the devil, a right that's protected by law. And three, satanic cults, what appear to be highly secretive groups committing criminal acts, including murder. First, let's examine self-styled Satanists like Ricky Casso. Often they're teenagers who learn that the message of Satanism is for sale right in the neighborhood. This shopping mall in affluent Westchester County, New York, exemplifies how easy it is for children, or adults for that matter, to get their hands on satanic material. We stress it's perfectly legal, and these are typical commercial outlets you'll find just about anywhere. 3 stores side by side, a bookstore, a music store, a videotape center, each offering seemingly harmless types of entertainment, like movies. Here at the neighborhood videotape store, take a look at the number of movies that involve Satanism. Most were popular films in their day, but even today, if one is inclined to believe in Satanism, it's a way to actually see the devil and perhaps be inspired. In The Exorcist, it is the tremendous power of the devil himself controlling a little girl's body against the will of a priest that makes the movie still one of the most popular examples of evil versus good.
By this sign the blood of our Lord Jesus Christ, who lives and reigns with the Father.
It wasn't that a demon jumped out of the TV and grabbed me by the face and dragged me down the road and forced me to join the Church of Satan. It was just that there were certain things in this program that piqued my interest, and then I decided to study more on my own. And if the devil has PR, then it is, cinema.
Then there's also the satanic literature, which includes many books that are sold in many bookstores. Librarians point out that they're among the most popular books on their shelves. Here, as in almost any bookstore, you'll find both the Satanic Bible and its companion, the Satanic Rituals, a step-by-step guide to performing evil rites.
Kids get their ideas, especially their psychological pumping up, so to speak, from the literature. And books play an extremely important part.
And finally, music, which is found here in the neighborhood record store under the category of heavy metal music. The satanic message is clear, both in the album covers and in the lyrics, which are reaching impressionable young minds. And the musical message comes across loud and clear at concerts and now through rock videos. The symbolism is all there. The satanic pentagram. the upside-down cross, the blank eyes of the beast, the rebellion against Christianity, and again, the obsession with death. According to most groups, it's all done in fun. But according to police, it's having an effect on many children. A growing subculture that mixes heavy metal music with drugs and the occult. In addition to groups that are blatantly satanic, there are also many recordings which some believe may contain satanic references in the form of backward messages.
What's a popular song that has a reference to the devil in it?
Chris Edmonds is a Detroit disc jockey
Stairway to Heaven,
whose specialty is finding secret recorded messages exhorting the devil by playing music popular with kids in reverse, a technique they've learned to use.
Okay, the phrase we're looking for is, and there's still time to change the road you're on. Now flip it for us. Okay. A lot of people hear the phrase, my sweet Satan, here when they play this backwards. Can you hear it?
My sweet Satan.
How often do you find heavy metal music indicators at the scene of a crime involving satanic worship?
Probably about 35-40% of calls.
Regularly, then?
Yes.
This artwork is from a homicide case that combined heavy metal music with self-styled Satanism. It's the work of 18-year-old Scott Waterhouse, a so-called Satanist whose drawings clearly show he had murder on his mind. He's now serving a life prison term for the slaying of 12-year-old Giselle Cody. Before this case, officers here at the local police station in Sanford, Maine, had never even heard about satanic crimes. But that's all changed. The officer who broke the case was State Detective Mo Olette.
When you reached the crime scene, what did you find?
When I reached the crime scene, the local police had cordoned the area off, showed me the bank and where the young lady was found. She was probably killed right there at that particular area. She was strangled.
Waterhouse was seen leaving the crime scene, and in a deposition, when he was later questioned by Officer Olette, he seemed almost proud to boast, "I'm a Satanist." Waterhouse also described how he first became involved in it. In a bookstore, my friend hit the shelf and a book fell out, and I caught it, and it had a pretty weird-looking guy on the back. The book was the Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey. After Scott Waterhouse's trial, both the prosecution and the victim's father claimed that although the Satanic Bible did not condone violence, Waterhouse had interpreted it that way.
The book made you feel, do what you want to do, and the heck with everybody else, more or less. And I believe that that had a lot to do with it.
It tries to make itself innocuous. But if you actually read it and believe it to the letter, it's a very dangerous manifesto.
The author of the Satanic Bible, Anton LaVey, is a former lion tamer and palm reader, who in 1966 founded the First Church of Satan. It quickly became the country's most prominent satanic organization, fully protected as a religion under the law.
This is a very selfish religion. We believe in greed, we believe in selfishness, we believe in all of the lustful thoughts that motivate man, because this is man's natural feeling. This is based on what man naturally would do.
The Church of Satan and other organized devil worship groups represent our second category, religious Satanist. Although LaVey would not talk to us, we can get a glimpse of his theories and his rituals in this 1970 documentary on his church.
We feel a person should be free to indulge in all of the so-called fetishes that they would desire, as long as they don't hurt anyone that doesn't deserve or wish to be hurt. Hail Satan! Hail Satan! We perform human sacrifices by proxy, you might say, the destruction of human beings who would, let's say, create an antagonistic situation towards us in the form of curses and hexes. Not in actual blood rituals, because certainly the destruction of a human being physically is illegal.
Police we spoke to say they have never made a link between this satanic church and the satanic crimes being committed. However, some incidents described to us by witnesses from around the country are strikingly similar to these ritualistic scenes. For example, the ritualistic embracing of death, actually being placed inside a coffin containing a body.
Lo, you are free to end it when you will.
Or ritualistic sacrifice, using a voodoo-type doll to place a curse on an unsuspecting victim. It's nothing that can be called physically harmful or illegal.
Almighty Satan, Destroy those who love God.
Although not connected to the Church of Satan, these 12-year-old boys, with their parents' consent, demonstrated how they were taught to inflict pain on their enemies. They also claimed they witnessed sacrificial murder by members of our third category of Satanism, satanic cults. Police have found no proof, made no arrest. But that's no surprise, for nationwide, police are hearing strikingly similar horror stories, and not one has ever been proved. Take, for example, this case, the mother of a young victim who asked not to be identified.
Usually they have the children kill the infants or the other kids.
The children who were there actually were given knives?
Yes, they were. And if they refused to do it, an adult, usually the child's father or mother, would actually take the child's hand and make them kill the child.
There's also this similar case that links child sex abuse with murder.
The children were given knives and told to go and stab those bodies. And my grandchildren told me that they couldn't do that, that it wasn't possible, that they could only get the knives to go in about that far. And then the adults put their hands over the children's hands and shoved the knives in.
Was there any reference to the devil?
No.
Yes.
And this case now under police investigation involving young boys describing murder.
Tell me what you were asked to do.
I was asked to stab him.
To stab him. And this was in front of the other people who were there? Were you given a knife?
Yes.
And were you told what would happen to you if you didn't?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember what they said?
This will happen to you.
So you either stab him or you'll be stabbed was about what it came down to. When the oldest boy describes stabbing him with a knife, what's his reaction?
It's a hard thing for him to say. He's been more apt to act it out.
Do you remember his eyes?
With their guardian's consent, the boys used a doll to illustrate what they did.
You say you were given the knife, and then what did you do?
Go like this.
Did you push the knife all the way in deep, or did you just touch the skin?
All the way in deep.
In deep. Were you in the room where this was going on? Did you see what happened to the child that was stuck with the knife?
Yeah.
What do you remember?
Or blood.
Ritualistic murder has become a specialty for San Francisco's chief medical examiner.
Are local investigators really prepared, equipped? Do they know what to look for when investigating these cases?
No, I don't think they do. Even though many different people are trying to get out the message about ritualistic or funny types of killings, first of all, just on their face value, they sound so unusual or bizarre that most people hearing that message really don't think that it's true.
It's bizarre and hard to prove. Yet details that were told to us in interviews conducted across the country were later verified by authorities, who say there are consistent telltale clues. And they provide a checklist of 6 satanic practices to look for. For example, being placed inside a coffin. It's an experience that many children are describing.
Well, the adults would dig up the caskets from the graveyards, and all the members, including the children, were made to lay in the remains of whatever was in the casket.
Get in a casket with a decomposed body.
Right, and then the casket was closed, and they would be lowered into the ground while they were in the casket.
The author of a popular book on Satanism, Dr. Lawrence Pastor.
Children are involved in graveyards and crematoria, in funeral parlors, because one of the primary focuses of these people is death. Everything is attempted to be destroyed and killed in that child and in society, everything of goodness. And death is a major preoccupation.
Another indicator, satanic paraphernalia. In every case, the children talk about precisely the same setting.
They described a satanic goat's head being on the wall over the table. They described a lot of candles. And they described people in black and white robes with hoods.
The hood, Mike, what's this for?
This is to create for whoever's practicing a magical atmosphere.
The colors mean anything?
Yeah, the red ones would be used for some types of sexual rituals, people who are doing sexual magic. This would be used for ordinary ceremonies and also for ceremonies where you'd be throwing a curse on somebody.
Another indicator, kidnapping. In almost every case, the children have talked about children who were snatched and later sacrificed.
They were taught to aid in the kidnapping of children. What they would do is the kids would go and play with the children and then tell them that they were either going to go to a party or that there was some toys or whatever and get them so they weren't on the move, and then her father and other members would grab the kids.
Do you find missing children sometimes fall prey to these people?
I believe that they do. We can't prove that they do. But as a law enforcement officer, I question 2 million children missing in the United States, knowing that many, many of those are not runaways and are so young that they couldn't run away anyway.
Number 4, sexual abuse aimed at destroying faith in God. It's being described by numerous children.
What were the parallels with what the boys have told you and the worship of Satan?
Well, first of all, the sexual abuse, the pornography, which always seems to go hand in hand. The boys talked about how these people actually said, "I hate God," and they used a very deep voice when they talked about that.
One of their primary aims is to destroy the belief system within a child, to make a child turn against what they believe in terms of who they are, of who God is, and to desecrate all manner of flesh, all manner of church institution, all manner of sign and symbol that a child could in any way be attached to.
Cannibalism. It's difficult to believe, but in every case we examined, children described it.
The hearts were cut out, and the children were made to chew pieces of these children's hearts, pieces of their flesh.
Is cannibalism part of the ritual?
The children have spoken about this in almost every instance. Also, human feces, or drinking the urine, or drinking human blood.
That's part of the ritual.
Right.
I have an old 3-inch scar here on my wrist where my friends used to cut my arm open and bleed my blood into a cup and drink it mixed with wine and urine 4 times a year as a ceremony to Satan.
And finally, cremation. Most of the children describe witnessing it. It might explain why no bodies have been found. So far, police have failed to make the connection, as in the case of yet another youngster who, with his mother's consent, described how bodies were disposed of.
He would take the bodies and put a trash bag over the feet and head. He'd put it, and then what he would do is he had his car parked out back. So he took them to the funeral home, and they were cremated, and nobody ever knew anything about the bodies.
These people cover their tracks very well. When they dispose of a body, they use that body as well. They will use, as I said, they will cremate that body. They will use the ashes that will become part of what they will continue to present to that particular group, and they will disperse that. They're not going to do some simple murder and leave a body in a stream for you to pick up the pieces of.
6 clues that point to the illegal worship of Satan, each based on the testimony of children, and none of it has ever been proved.
The problem that exists is we're getting the stories, but we don't have the victims. Once it's proven with one case, it's going to add more credibility to each one of the other cases.
Until that one case is proved, the link between crime and satanic cults will remain speculative. The victims in this report did break the grip of Satanism, but each is left with permanent scars, and experts say they were lucky to escape.
When you get into one of these groups, there's only a couple ways you can get out. One is death. The other is mental institutions. Or the third, you can't get out.
That's terrifying, and that's no choice.
Serious business.
If the police were aware of this, it might be that they could get to the instigators, to the top people. Why isn't there more awareness on the part of the police?
Police are very reluctant to investigate these crimes as satanic crimes, Barbara, because communities quite naturally don't want their reputation stigmatized as being the home of the devil. They prefer to try to categorize them as drug-related crimes, sex-related crimes, or robbery or something that they're more familiar with.
Individual, rather than finding out who's behind it. Look, if this happens to your kid, or if you look at this and if you have children, you say, could this happen to my child out of some kind of rebellion? How would a parent be aware?
Many youngsters are into it, teenagers and younger, and the clues are there. The satanic symbol, 666, if you see that written on your child's notebook, if they're
into heavy metal music, if they're associating with strange characters or drifting off to ceremonies and not explaining where they're at, it's well worth it for parents to look deeper and ask, what exactly are you up to?
And with whom?
Because this is serious.
It could be harmless. It could just be a diversion, but it could also be deadly serious.
Absolutely.
The Pagan Invasion is an explosive new 13-part video series providing a thorough behind-the-scenes examination of today's New Age movement and neo-pagan revival. Each superbly produced volume features rare footage from around the world, along with expert analysis by noted Christian leaders and authors. For more information, contact your local Christian bookstore or call 1-800-828-2290. California residents call 1-800-633-0869.
Hello, I'm Chuck Smith.
And I'm Carol Matriciana. Welcome to this edition of The Pagan Invasion.
Satanism. It is a subject that can produce a variety of reactions, from incredulous disbelief to paralyzing fear. Yet even if one were to choose not to believe in the reality of Satanism, one would at least have to acknowledge its growing entry into mainstream society. Movies like Exorcist III and Witches fill the theaters and living rooms throughout our nation. Sadistic violence floods feature films with the bodies of the dead and maimed. Music videos have turned increasingly pornographic. More than 50 major black metal rock groups preach satanic messages, and even call for the worship of the Prince of Darkness. Occult images of superheroes with magical powers of sorcery fill the hearts and the minds of children in the cartoons and video games. 75 years of films, 50 years of TV, and decades of recorded music have brought Americans to an insatiable lust for sex, violence, witchcraft, perversion, and occultic mysteries. The dawn of the 21st century has brought this nation to an unbelievable and yet undeniable obsession with the macabre. In a word, our society has marched boldly and defiantly through the doorway of Satan.
This fascination with the works of darkness and the occult is seen at every level of our society. From the absolutely phenomenal success of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to Anton LaVey's first Church of Satan in San Francisco, our culture is being sucked deeper and deeper into the vortex of satanic influence and domination. Today, according to our research, multiplied thousands in the free world are involved in Satanism. A recent publication from Europe reports that there are up to 100,000 black witches, Satanists, and chaos magicians in Great Britain alone. In Germany, an estimated 10,000 people practice black magic. Law enforcement agencies across North America are inundated with criminal cases involving satanic activity. Everything from grave desecrations to child pornography and molestations, ritual abuse, animal mutilations, human sacrificial murder, cannibalism, rape, sodomy, and defacement of churches and synagogues.
Leading experts on Satanism and crime in America speculate that there is an international network of Satanists who are responsible for child pornography. Satanism is on the rise, and it's not about to go away.
Teenagers across America are playing with a new and frightening game, Satanism. Their school books are marked up with satanic symbols, upside-down crosses, pentagrams, the number 666. Their fashions glamorize the demonic. They are seduced by heavy metal heroes, many of whom feature satanic imagery in their songs and album covers. For some of these young people, the fixation on violence, evil, and death leads them to commit abominable crimes, including suicide and human sacrifice. Joseph Beeson, 18, and Edward Bennett, 19, both raised in Mormon homes, drew blood from their own veins and mutilated animals in satanic rituals. But that wasn't enough, so they eventually killed 18-year-old Michelle Moore. Sean Sellers, 17, the youngest death row inmate in Oklahoma, brutally murdered his mother and stepfather because they tried to prevent his satanic rituals. Scott Waterhouse, 17, tortured and killed a 12-year-old girl in a grisly satanic slaughter. Pete Rowland, 17, formed a satanic cult with 3 other boys. After sacrificing a cat, they turned on Steve Newberry, the 4th member of their group, and beat him to death with baseball bats while chanting, "A sacrifice for Satan." Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, was convicted of 13 murders and 30 other felonies. During the summer of 1985, he beat, strangled, raped, sodomized, shot, and slashed his victims in a rampage of sadistic satanic slayings. In the spring of '89, the dead bodies of 13 victims, one of whom was only 16 years old, were found mutilated and buried in a common grave near the American-Mexican border in Matamoros. This satanic drug-smuggling cult believed that sacrificing humans in bizarre rituals would give them magical protection. The victims had been dealt blows with a hammer, and some suffered horrible mutilations, including the removal of brains, hearts, and other organs that were then boiled in blood. For those of us who have been involved in cult and occult research over the years, these atrocious reports are unfortunately nothing new. They are only the tip of the iceberg. What used to be hidden or secret is now arrogantly brandished in public by Satanists who recruit openly and display macabre graffiti and gruesome mutilations in public places. Englishman Aleister Crowley, a leading inspiration in today's revival of Satanism, was a bisexual heroin addict and demonologist who was violently opposed to Christianity. In his book Magic, he detailed the proper procedure for performing a child sacrifice. Crowley's powerful influence is seen in such groups as the OTO, Ordo Templi Orientis, and Colonel Michael Aquino's Temple of Set, an offshoot from the Church of Satan. In 1966, Anton LaVey founded the first Church of Satan in San Francisco, which at one point claimed 10,000 members. LaVey authored the Satanic Bible and Satanic Rituals, two of Satanism's most important books. Astonishingly, when the Satanic Bible was first published, it outsold the Holy Bible 2-to-1 in many parts of America and 10-to-1 on some college campuses. It teaches tenets that are totally opposed to goodness, purity, and selfless behavior.
Shemham Barash. Shemham Barash. Hail Satan! Hail Satan!
To the Satanist, good is evil and evil is good. The truth is a lie and a lie is a truth. Sweet is bitter and bitter is sweet. And everything is twisted around the other way.
The Satanists have merely followed the pantheist way of thought to its logical conclusion. If there are no absolutes, if God doesn't exist, he hasn't set absolute limits to what we can do. So therefore, anything that the self decides it wants, the self can go after.
We believe in greed, we believe in selfishness, we believe in all of the lustful thoughts that motivate man, because this is man's natural feeling.
And therefore, Satanists take that to its extreme and say, if I want to be violent, I can be violent. If I want to hurt others to gain my way, then I can hurt others to gain my way.
There are generally 4 different groups of Satanists. We would like to classify them as the dabbler. Then you have your religious Satanist. Then you have your non-traditional Satanist, and then your generational Satanist. The dabbler we would classify as the teenager. The teenager would simply learn some things from his friends at school, dabble a little bit in the Ouija board, go down the library or the local bookstore and pick up a book, and kind of do his own thing. Not real dangerous, but he can be moved into further areas which could be criminal or dangerous in nature.
The dabblers are the people who are putting the graffiti up on walls, knocking over tombstones, and making a general nuisance of themselves in the public. They are the ones also who will do the animal sacrifices, and they're really novices. They're considered lower-level Satanists by those who are higher up into the satanic realm. The religious Satanists are protected by law. Anton LaVey's First Church of Satan in San Francisco would be an example of that. They are religious in their approach, and they try not to violate any man-made laws because it is not productive for their own self-interest.
Now, the non-traditional Satanist is a gentleman or lady or the group of people who would take certain ideologies, develop a cult, usually polarized around some central theme, oftentimes taken from a biblical aspect, and use that to commit crimes, or they may not commit any crimes, but for what we're talking about for these purposes, the non-traditional Satanist is oftentimes the most dangerous.
Now then there are generational Satanists. These are people who would have Satanism in their family, and it's passed down from generation to generation, just as the name would intimate, and these Satanists would produce all kinds of horrors secretly.
From infancy, they have learned all these things. They have been molested, forced to drink blood, eat feces, urinated upon, sodomized, and just from generation to generation, it continues.
Their main teaching is that Satan had a part in creating the world with God, and he was wrongfully thrown out of heaven when he asked for equal power along with Jehovah God, and that one day he would regain his rightful place. So we have to make his army bigger, so the more recruits there are in Satanism and the occult on the earth, the quicker his army would grow, and then he would take over and overthrow Christ and the Christian church.
Now, worshiping of Satan is not a crime in the United States of America. It's protected under the First Amendment. Therefore, if you see a group of people dancing around a fire, they're not committing any crime. There's nothing that the United States law enforcement can do.
It's not against the law to be a Satanist or to be a member of a witchcraft group, you know, or to be a doorknob worshiper. I don't really care what your form of religion is. I don't investigate the religion. It's the crime I investigate.
There are no statistics to prove anywhere in the United States of America or the world that this stuff is widespread. But it's my opinion that it's more widespread than you can shake a stick at.
In Britain, we are beginning to see that Satanism is widespread. From the contacts we have through social services, voluntary agencies and the police, we are beginning to monitor the situation, therefore developing a picture which is showing that we have a very serious problem.
Priests, ministers, doctors, police officers, judges, businessmen, oilmen, teenagers are all linked together for one purpose: to sacrifice whatever they want to Satan.
Yeah. It would be a whole lot easier if these people wore, you know, had horns and a pitchfork and a red suit, but they just don't. They could be your next door neighbor.
Glenn Hobbs is an ex-Satanist who was originally initiated into Satanism as a child by his grandfather. I recently asked him to reflect on some of his experiences.
My family was, in some senses, royalty in the occult. We had a real pure bloodline that everybody in my family had been priests or priestesses, and I was to take over that position. I had been chosen to take over that position.
Glenn, can you explain the different purposes of ritualistic abuse to children?
This was part of the systematic thing that they were doing. They were trying to make all my feelings towards blood, towards abuse, towards all these things seared, so that I had no type of emotional response to it whatsoever. Now, when I saw the blood of the animals that were cut, and most of the time they would hold the animal over me and they'd slit its throat, and the blood would drip down over my body, and you know, I was nude, and then they would force me to do sexual acts, and then we'd be passed around to the different cult members, and they would have sexual relations with us. I think at the time that it was happening, I was just so, the thought that was going through my mind was I was just so happy that it wasn't me that had got my throat slit.
As a teenager, you grew into another category of Satanism. Can you explain what happened?
I began to pray to Satan, and I began to say, take over my life, you know, make me your high priest. All these things that somehow I knew that had been ingrained in me as a child were coming back to me as a teenager. And I made that blood contract with Lucifer. I had slit my wrist and wrote out a parchment between me and Lucifer. And after that, I completely changed. I became more like a priest, more active in my life, very rebellious. I began to excel academically. I began to excel in every area of my life. Most of the rituals I performed as a teenager were animal rituals. I didn't perform any human sacrifices because the spirit guides and the demons that were in my life at that time were instructing me that until I initially came into the coven and took over the position as the high priest, that was when I would perform human sacrifice. And I was looking forward to it. I was looking forward to my first human sacrifice.
At the heart of Satanism is a lust for power and pleasure. Satanists endeavor to invoke spirit beings to tap into a power source beyond the physical realm. Many are convinced that it is Satan himself who appears to them while they are in a meditative state or performing a ritual. Others speak of the apparitions as gods, goddesses, and even demons. Channeling, seances, astral projection, mediums, and visualization are all a part of the attempt to plug into a power source that is controlled by the demonic.
As far as the attraction, I mean, what actually would make somebody become a Satanist? Well, for some people, in my case at least, it was a gradual infiltration. It was a move from things like ESP and flying saucers, and then just a very gradual, many-year slide into finally regarding Satan as my God.
I got into Satanism simply because of the promise of power and wealth, and by being invited to some parties which I went to, I was told I could have those things, but it was a special gift that I couldn't have until I had been initiated.
I think it can be put in one four-letter word, lust. And I don't just mean sexual lust. There is a lust for power that is part of our sinful nature. There is a lust, of course, for sexuality. And there is a kind of, C.S. Lewis talks about it as a spiritual lust, as the kind of spiritual itch to want to somehow reach into the unknown. We're fascinated by it.
As a young boy of 13, 14, I practiced magic. When you're that age, there's no limit to the scope of your imagination. And so, everything magical that we'd heard of, we tempted. Calling forth the devil, invoking demons. We tried all these things, and with some effects.
In 1981, Mark's quest to experience the more powerful side of black magic led him to start his own satanic coven, the Temple of Olympus.
As far as I'm concerned, magic is about getting what you want. Magicians are people who get what they want.
They want the quick, slick answers to life by calling down these forces so they will be able to manipulate whatever they need.
If you're not popular, you are told that certain rituals, compassion rituals, will gain you popularity or gain you prestige with the opposite sex. And this is something that is also a lure to the Satanists. It's the basic elemental carnal lusts of the flesh that draw them in.
They taught me how to kill someone, a spell, how to kill someone, a spell, how to get someone to lust for me.
From my experience, a child has turned to Satanism initially because of an emotional reason. We have many more children coming from single-parent families or where the head of the home, the father, is not taking the fatherly role.
With teenagers especially, the appeal is to rebellion. The appeal is to do whatever you can do to drive your parents crazy.
They want to supernaturally get back at their parents. And we have found a lot of teenagers wanting to do it that way. The other reason, I believe, is because the church has not met the needs of these teenagers. They have not seen the supernatural power of God in the church. They've not really seen the love of Christ amongst the people.
Today, Satanism can be seen to be more blatant than ever before. Satanic graffiti is no longer shocking, while recruiting, which was once hidden and obscure, is now visibly public, and sadly, youth are the chief targets.
Recruiters will go out there into various high schools and draw kids into the system because they're very street smart, some of these Satanists, and they can draw these kids into it very seductively where their parents may not even know it.
I have young people calling me regularly, telling me that they have been involved in some sort of animal mutilation sacrifice. And the reason why they say that they go out to these animal mutilation sacrifices is because they're provided with vodka or drugs, cocaine, or free sex.
And so to cover up what I'd seen and what I'd been taking part in, I started taking drugs, which they provided. So that was another reason for staying at the coven. They were providing me heroin.
The old proverb warning against wine, women and song has taken on new spiritual momentum. Sex, drugs and rock and roll is the modern cry of a rebellious youth. Satanist Aleister Crowley has indirectly influenced many leading rock groups, including the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin and Ozzy Osbourne, who even wrote a song about Crowley. Today's music industry commercializes satanic themes without concern for the souls they seduce. Even those bands who promote hardcore Satanism deny that they are Satanists, but admit that Satanism sells and that they are simply giving their fans what they want to hear. Many bands get their ideas from horror films and videos, which explicitly depict satanic rituals, death, murder, and cruel tortures. Evidence shows music laced with satanic overtones has played an important role in the lives of many of the teenagers who have been convicted of satanic killings. Night Stalker Richard Ramirez, obsessed with the music of the rock group AC/DC, admitted that their lyrics influenced his mayhem killings.
I see a lot of them that get involved in it, and it started out with the music, you know, not all rock music, mostly the things like the black metal or speed metal type things, where they have the heavy satanic type overtones to the music.
Your groups such as Venom, Slayer, Merciful Fate, these are bands that will blatantly teach these kids of various occultic practices.
One of the more popular bands playing in London is a group called The Devoted Men, led by Mark, High Priest of the Temple of Olympus. Mark says he receives transmissions from demon gods and goddesses who give him the music and lyrics to perform on stage.
Very frequently there's this otherworldliness about the words themselves. It's almost as if we're not writing the words, but we're just, our hand is performing the action, but it's not our mind. The Devoted Men take the music that we write for the Temple of Olympus and perform it in London at the night spots and venues before a live young audience. Basically present our message.
The band's main function is to recruit new members into the outer circle of Mark's satanic cult. High priestesses Sarah and Julianne left the cult due to the inner circle's heavy dependence on black magic and perverted sex rituals.
The idea of the Devoted Men, which was the band that they had, was another way to try and get world domination. They thought that by being a successful rock band that they'd get the money to go to the States and open up an enormous complex religion over there.
When you first joined the Temple of Olympus, you'd attend an outer circle meeting, and from going along to that you wouldn't realise what was really going on in the Temple of Olympus at all, because that's only witnessed by the inner order. You'd be offering flowers and wine and reading out poetry, and everything would be very sweet and very lovely.
In Britain, we are seeing from the recruitment programmes that we are watching and from the contact magazines that we have, that what is being advertised and what is actually happening in the coven are two different things.
We were told to use whitewash liberally and to cover up any signs of any shades of black magic at all that were in the inner order.
And there are many other orders who put on this front of being fairly innocent, but actually when the people are involved and initiated, they see that they're being trained into prostitution, in pornography, as well as into Satanism itself as a religion.
Glenn, how did you get out of Satanism?
I was having some trouble in an English class, and they assigned a tutor to me. It was a little old Christian woman. And for the first time in my life, I was confronted with something that was bigger than me and bigger than Satan. I walked into that room, and that little lady, a little old lady, was sitting there, and there was this holy light that was around her. I could see it. And the demons that were in my life, that always went with me, they never left me, they never let me make a decision by myself. They instructed me in every area of my life, who were always with me 24 hours a day. The minute I walked into that room, they were gone. They left. I was left completely vulnerable to this woman. I was infuriated. I was so mad because I was threatened by a Christian. And it just shook everything that I believed in for a moment. And she began to share with me Jesus Christ in a new way that I had never learned before. She told me that Jesus loved me. I had no concept of love. Love to me was something you took. It was something you used to get what you wanted. She told me something that has stuck with me all my life. She said, Glenn, Jesus became a sacrifice for you willingly. Now, as a Satanist, I knew everything about sacrifice. I knew what it was like to see people be sacrificed. And none of them were willing to do it. And I said, okay, Jesus, if you're up there and you really died for me, you sacrificed yourself for me, you know, you were stupid. You were stupid to do that. I mean, why would you do something like that? If you're God and you're so real, prove it to me. Prove it. So I clenched my fists and I closed my eyes and I stood there waiting for something to happen. I thought, you know, if he's God, he's going to move the earth or there'd be a bright light or something, you know. But God threw me a curveball. He did something that I would have never expected. He moved past all the Satanism. He moved past all the hurt. He moved past all those icy walls. He reached in with his loving hand, reached around my cold heart, and poured into me a love that I had never felt since I was a little boy. I never knew what it was like to be loved. I never knew what it was like to be taken in my mother's arms or my father's arms and to say, I love you. I'm going to protect you.
Glenn, do you think that Christians are susceptible to being drawn into the occult?
I certainly do. I know of many Christian people who tamper with the occult, many Christian people who go to fortune tellers and have their palms read. There are many Christians who read their horoscopes, many Christians who read occultic books. And the thing about it is many Christians think that just because they've come to Jesus Christ and he has forgiven them, that somehow that puts a magical protection around them and they can do whatever they want to do. They can tamper in the occult. But the Lord points out really clear that if you open yourself up to Satan, if you give him a foothold in your life, he will affect you. He will take that legal right, and he will cause your life to be one living mess.
Do you think that heavy metal music can be a tantalization into the occult?
I think of one young boy that his parents were Christians. The boy began to listen to King Diamond, some of these guys who are professed Satanists and have very strong satanic lyrics in their music. He began to really concentrate all of his efforts, and he'd come home, he'd go in his room, and he'd begin to listen to this music over and over and over and over again. That kid had built an altar, he was worshiping Satan, and he was doing it from the lyrics of this music. And the parents thought that by going into his room, that somehow they were going into his area, you know, that they didn't have a right to do that. But if they had just taken a little effort to go in and see what was going on, they could have saved their child from killing himself, which he did, killing himself in the name of Satan. But that was a gradual process. It wasn't something that happened overnight. I think of one young lady, her name was Patty. She was the daughter of a minister And this girl felt so alone, she felt so rejected by her church group, by her parents. She didn't feel like she fit in, she didn't feel like she belonged. Well, she had been invited to a party. Now, the people who threw this party were practicing Satanists. They saw her coming a mile off, and they said, "Patty, we can see that you are a special person. Patty, we see you've got a special ability. You've got some kind of a psychic ability. You know things that other people don't know, right?" And Patty would say, "Yes, that's right." They began to show her approval. They began to have these parties where they had seances. They had these parties where they would have drugs. Now, it escalated to the point where she was involved in a sexual orgy. And they took Polaroid pictures of her. They brought the pictures to her, and they said, "Now, we're doing this for your good, Patty. You've got to become a part of this coven. And if you don't, we're going to show your parents what you've done." Of course, what did she do? She became part of the coven. And the minute she did that, she went into rebellion. A spirit of rebellion fell over her. She became a high priestess of that coven and totally forsaked all of the Christian teaching in her life. And why was that? Because she didn't feel the love of Jesus Christ in her life from Christian people.
In September 1990 in Washington, D.C., an international gathering of leaders of the Church of Satan from across America and Europe was held. The objectives were to plan a strategy and perform rituals designed to launch Satan's all-out assault on the true Church of Jesus Christ and to work destruction upon Christians, especially Christian leaders. It was hoped that this convention would unleash full satanic power around the earth and harvest additional souls for Satan. Drawings by children reveal how they were forced to participate in atrocious satanic rituals involving animal and human sacrifice, sometimes even compelled to eat raw meat and drink blood. Heartbreaking accounts detail how children were deliberately trapped in cages or graves for hours at a time, sometimes even with snakes, how they were defecated and urinated on, sodomized and raped by adults in satanic ceremonies. Sometimes adults would wear robes similar to Christian clergy and perform rituals in Christian churches, not only to mock God, but to terrorize the children against a belief in biblical Christianity.
Is the court system able to handle this type of philosophy? Do they believe in Satanism? I mean, a lot of people just laugh at it.
Satanists believe that sexual perversions combined with the spilling of innocent blood conjures up the strongest powers. Reports show animals including dogs, cats, goats and horses being savagely skinned alive, having their blood drained, organs removed or being split open and nailed to upside-down crosses.
It's believed that if you just kill an animal, that's not much good. You've got to kill it slowly because, and this will be true of a person too, of course, that the screams and that the agony of the animal would contribute to the high level of power.
What results we had. After just the first ritual, we were moved to throw every effort into the successive workings. The power, the response.
Animal sacrifices is commonplace today. And in the order that I was involved in years ago, there was even human sacrifice.
These various satanic covens that meet need to have this kind of sacrifice for their high festival days. And it's sort of I hate to say it like this, but it's like supply and demand. The more satanic covens there are, the more children and babies and teenagers are going to be brought out and sacrificed. And again, it is the destruction of innocence that they seek.
From one of the nicer, quieter, more beautiful parts of England, namely the county of Surrey, where people would find it hard to believe that these things go on, There is a confession from a woman who said that her baby, when born, was used as a human sacrifice in satanic rituals. She said it herself. She has said it in public. What does one make of that other than a heartbreaking confession to something that's been a guilty secret for a long time?
You did things just because they were evil, just because you knew they hurt God, not because they gave you pleasure, but because you knew that it was a sin against God.
I had a 17-year-old boy call me and tell me that a year prior to his call, he was considering joining a satanic group. And he said the only thing that stopped him from joining was that he had to violate every one of the 10 Commandments. He said he was willing to do that, except they were pushing for him to kill one of his parents. And that snapped into reality.
The secularization of our society, the media, schools, churches, and government institutions has created a vacuum whereby Satanism has been able to move in and capture the hearts and souls of a vulnerable generation. At no time in modern history has occultism in its various forms been so widely practiced as it is today. Here are some things that concerned parents can look out for.
You can see warning signs sometimes in a perfectly happy, healthy child who suddenly changes so dramatically in his behavior. Or a child who begins to show signs or suspicions of drug abuse.
You will see the same withdrawal symptoms as you would with drug abuse, where there is a change in personality, aggression, a rebelliousness towards the parents, difficulty in sleeping, temper tantrums, and wanting to stay in their room so that they can play with the altar or call upon the gods.
Pay attention to what, his notebooks, things like that. What's he really scratching or drawing on his notebooks, What's he doing at home, Is he withdrawn into himself? Is he avoiding the rest of the family?
The greatest protection a parent can do is to keep an open line of communication with their young people. That's the central theme that comes up over and over with kids. Well, I can't talk to my mom. I can't talk to my father.
Let them know right from the start. It's okay to talk to you, You're not going to condone them doing things wrong, but you're not going to stop loving them either.
It's no good shouting and getting mad with the kid. It is time to put your family in order.
If we don't handle this now properly in our church by teaching our Christian children where their protection lies, where their faith is, who is Satan, and where he is in position to the Christian gospel, then we are going to be rendering the next generation useless in defeating this problem, which is just escalating.
The Bible tells us that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and these spirit forces in the high places. Paul the Apostle also tells that the world system is under the control of Satan, and that the God of this world has blinded the eyes of many people so that they cannot see. If you do not yield your life to Jesus Christ and know the power of Jesus in your life, then your life will come under the influence and the control and the power of Satan. Jesus said concerning Satan that the enemy has come to rob, to kill, and to destroy. And yielding your life to the satanic powers will ultimately destroy you. In contrast, Jesus said, "But I have come that you might have life, and that more abundantly." The Lord offers to you an abundant life today. Satan offers destruction. A man must make his choice whether he will yield to the powers of God or to the powers of darkness. When you consider the consequences, it really doesn't make a choice, but it is just plain good sense to yield yourself to God. Within all of us, there is a God-shaped vacuum. Throughout the ages, man has attempted to fill that void with the things of the world. But it is only through a relationship with our Creator that we can be truly satisfied. His Holy Scriptures reveal the way in which we can be reconciled to God, and that is through the provisions of His Son, Jesus Christ. I'm Chuck Smith.
And I'm Carol Matriciana. Join us again for another edition of The Pagan Invasion.
The Pagan Invasion is an explosive new 13-part video series providing a thorough behind-the-scenes examination of today's New Age movement and neo-pagan revival. Each superbly produced volume features rare footage from around the world, along with expert analysis by noted Christian leaders and authors. For more information, contact your local Christian bookstore or call 1-800-828-2290. California residents call 1-800-633-0869.